All right, welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sonnone. I'm joined by Chris Nee, Zach Blostein. We are the Knowles 24/7 crew, and we are here to cover an FSU team that just finished its regular season 12-0, that just went into the swamp and silenced the Gators. It wasn't always pretty. The season hasn't always been pretty, but the win-loss total is perfect. So, fellas, let's start off. Do we feel bad for the sod that got ripped off? I think that was troubling to some people.
Hashtag,
Tradition.
hashtag classy.
Did enjoy that. It was a fun underscore and UF advocates talking about class when they're spewing spit on people and um, racially insensitive signs and making fun of broken legs and headshots. But yeah. The grass that can grow back was problematic. So FSU's win, guys. We're going to talk about it here, get into how it happened for the Seminoles, what it means for the context of just this really um, memorable season. But first off, a hat tip to Chattanooga Whiskey. They're killing it in the craft distillery game. If there was ever a reason to celebrate with Chattanooga Whiskey, I think it was on Saturday evening. You go ahead and get their entry level bourbon. Their cast strength is exceptional and extraordinary. Try to combine both of those still early here on Monday morning. And their rye whiskey is also awesome. I shared a roasted malt finish with one of our buddies, listener of the show, Matt, the other day. I think he enjoyed it. So, anyways, like everyone's going to get on the Chattanooga whiskey train because it's exceptional. We are proud to have him as our sponsor. All right, so this is a season still ongoing, right? There's still more chapters to be written, but we're starting to near the end. You have a couple games left, 3 if things go really well for you. But we're nearing the finish line here. This team is 12-0 through the regular season, one of only 7 teams in program history to do that. So let that sink in if you think about all the amazing football teams, football players, just moments that this program has produced. Not many can say 12-0. And appreciate like in the moment like what this team has gone through. Obviously the Jordan Travis injury, just a lot of like games in which you've had to kind of lean on an opponent and show grit, show resolve. And I think that, fellas, like I want to talk about that real quick before we get into like the nuts and bolts of the UF game. I appreciate the hell out of this team. I've for several years now really admired the way Mike Norvell's programs are handled since even the 2021 season. Like it felt like this heart and hustle vibe type of team. And they've just grown on that. They've added more talent to it, but like the effort, the energy, it's not always perfect. It's not always clean. It can be frustrating sometimes. But man, like I appreciate it. Chris, like your thoughts on just like what this season has meant to Florida State, to the fan base, and I think kind of like what 12-0 means for the program moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. 7 times in program history, they've been perfect. 4th time, they've been 12-0 because obviously seasons have gotten longer, regular seasons. And 11th time, they've gone perfect on the road. You know, this program's ultra accomplished. It's done a ton in its history, 3 national titles raised, all of those things. Winning is difficult. It's one of those things I always fall back on. This program, this year, this team, they just get it done. It's not always the prettiest. BC was, pull your hair out, frustrating at times.
It was.
Florida was a bad start. We've had a mix of good starts, bad starts, mostly good finishes outside of BC, really is about the only one I can think of. I guess maybe Wake Forest can throw in there, but whatever. That game was well in hand. Um, yeah, they get it done. They show up. They play the game of football. They play in all 3 phases. When they've had to have things, they've gotten them. Take Saturday night, for example, down a stretch in that game. Defense was phenomenal. Jared Verse was a badass, you know what? He made sure he didn't just sack the quarterback, that he also sacked the offensive tackle right into the quarterback. Braden Fisk played like a man on fire in the second half. Akeem Dent played like a man on fire in the first half. It just speaks to it's a cast of characters. It's not Jordan Travis is ultra important and a major reason FSU is where they are currently. But it's across the board. Deuce Spann kick return. Trey Benson coming up big with 3 touchdowns. Keon Coleman playing like a man against LSU. Johnny Wilson showing up when they have to have it. Jaheim Bell getting Tate Rodemaker settled in on Saturday with that big catch. Tate stepping into that role and handling that in the swamp. So on and so forth. O-line, it's up and down. It's frustrating at times. Can't always get a yard when you got to get it. But they still go out there. They battle their backsides off. I think we all know, especially me and Brendan with being at practice on a daily basis, that group is pretty beat to hell, especially at like center with Mo Smith. They just keep showing up and taking the punches. The front porch on defense has lived up to what it is. Kalen DeLoach, full-grown man, absolutely awesome to watch what he's turned into. Tatum Bethune right there beside him. Secondary has been outstanding. Renardo Green's turned into a glove. Fentrell Cypress has been dependable. A.Z. Thomas has turned into a solid starter type guy. We talked to some about safeties. Shaheem Brown starting every single game this year. It's across the board. Ryan Fitzgerald, comeback story of the year. A year ago, I wasn't convinced he was ever going to be a reliable kicker for this program again. This year, he's in the running for a Gross Award. Here we are. Alex Mastromano, with the exception of a 16-yard shank after a fake punt that didn't go well, been pretty damn phenomenal all year.
And that wasn't his fault either.
No, it wasn't. It was pressure, and he had to step up and all that.
Yeah.
But in general, he's been super dependable. It's across the board. I think that's the thing I appreciate the most is that it is done as a team. You can take talent composites, blue chip ratios, all those fun things we love to use. FSU is not the most talented team in the country. They're not the most blue chip heavy team in the country. They are one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country, and that's because they play as a team. They get it done. They're well coached. They truly have bought into everything that this culture and this program is about, which is work on a daily basis, care about the one in front of you, care about the guy beside you, and don't worry so much about the opponent. Be prepared for the opponent, but don't worry about the opponent. Worry about yourself and make sure you got your ducks in order. And they're extremely good at that on a weekly basis, and that's tough to do. You're dealing with 18 to 23-year-olds. I remember being 18 to 23. It is very tough to do it on a weekly basis and be consistent at it. FSU has been ultra consistent at it.
Zach, you're prone to bouts of anxiety just like myself, and they manifest in different ways. I want to get your thoughts early on in the game, where you're at emotionally when FSU falls down.
I mean, I think I know, obviously if you're level-headed, you're like, oh, it'll get fixed. But they couldn't do anything in the first half offensively besides that last drive before halftime. So to me, it was just, I was more so worried that they were never going to get Tate comfortable and settled in that game, in that environment. And they did. So kudos to that staff, kudos to Tate for stepping up, and kudos to the players around him for stepping up in that moment. That drive before half was the biggest development in that entire game, I thought, because it showed that Tate could get it done. That offense could move the ball downfield. Before that, there was, 20 yards of offense before that drive in the first half.
With minus 2 points on offense.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think I was worried, much like I would assume most of the fan base was heading into the half. They come out of the half, and I think it's pretty safe to bet now, like, Florida State's defense is just going to be lights out in the second half. That's just what they are. And they were more than that. That was the most dominant defensive performance we've seen them put together, in my opinion, this season, besides maybe LSU at the beginning of the year, just considering how great that offense was and is. But, you're in UF's place, and they literally couldn't do anything besides, I think, one drive in the second half. It was just, just an incredible performance by that defense.
Yeah, and we start to expect it at this point. Second half, Adam Fuller, he's kind of scripted. But so let's go into the turning points of this game, and to set the stage, the environment. And Chris, you can attest to this. Go ahead, Chris. You got something?
29-yard shot to Jaheim Bell. That's the turning point of the game.
That's when it changed. Yeah. And so what's happening is the environment it's nuts. It's as loud as probably any stadium that Chris and I have been at this season. That's including some really great games at Doak, Clemson on the road. This had juice to it. It had energy. It was loud. That stadium retains sound in a way. Chris, you made that point, in a way that
it's a box.
It is difficult to hear and to comprehend. Shout out to the Marching Chiefs. They were great in person. Rewatching the game, they were super loud on TV too.
It's all you could hear at some points.
Yes. So FSU had that, but the energy in that game. You have Jordan Travis who shows up. How awesome is that he's there on the sideline before the game, up in the box, and during the game, but he's there to support his team. But the environment, the energy, very difficult, I think, early on for Tate Rodemaker to kind of settle in. That was obvious, and he wasn't put in good situations. Trey Benson going negative for 7-9 yards, whatever it was. Just can't have that. And Trey redeems himself as he's known to do, but there's multiple drives in which you're backed up. There was, I mean, Max Brown for Florida, like makes some of the best throws that you're probably going to see a quarterback make this season.
Yeah.
And
the 24-yard, what was it, real shot that was to
with DJ Lundy trailing in coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it was just such a nice pass, though. It was one of those where it's like, oh man, he can make a high level pass. But at the end of the day, he finishes with only 86 yards thrown. He throws a pick late in the game.
You know, long term, I'm like, if you're Florida, like you might have something there, which is cool for them. During the game, I'm thinking, man, this is a redshirt freshman, and even in the first drive, he delivers some. I mean, there's multiple drives in the first that he delivers that are difficult. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, okay, how sustainable is that? Like, if he's going to do that all game, then yeah, it's going to be a dogfight, and you may not be able to recover, especially if your offense doesn't get going. And then there was finally the driver. I'm like, this is just like eventually it's going to bounce your way because it's normally how it does happen. But like the Akeem Dent forced fumble and the ball rolls out of bounds. And then a few plays later, Akeem Dent hits Max Brown, the ball flutters in the air, and UF catches it. And then they have a 62-yard punt. And like then there's a safety, and there's people covering Florida who thought it was
safety was the penalty. Do we want to enjoy that moment? Hey.
Oh, and let's talk about that real quick. Florida gets 4 points extra, which in a pretty close game matters because Akeem Dent.
And who knows who knows if they even get the field goal? That kid wasn't automatic.
Yeah, I mean, smack like Al Thornton shooting free throws as a freshman. He was about as 50-50 as they come.
It was that penalty, and this officiating crew was the same one at Clemson that allowed a lot of PIs to go through, and had a really bad red zone penalty on Tatum Bethune, a really like questionable holding call in that game, if you remember, that gave Clemson a new set of downs. So kind of similar type of vibes there. Mike Norvell let them know what he thought. I don't know if you guys saw the video after. People think that Mike Norvell may have said something to the ref. I don't know if that's what he was doing, but he was not shy during and even after the game of saying how what did he say, Chris? A terrible call, or that he.
I think he said he had a lot of things he felt like he could say about it, but he leaned more.
He had a lot of feelings about it being a terrible call. So you can't really can you find someone for feelings? I don't know,
but like maybe the league at some point will. It was ACC officials in the swamp there on Saturday. Maybe the league at some point will decide, hey, we got a decent football product here. Like, let's maybe do a half-ass decent job officiating it.
Not to derail it, like I listened to like a lot of like national podcasts, and like people in the SEC weren't happy with officiating across the league.
The Iron Bowl wasn't well officiated. Officiating sucks, but I mean, come on, like it's been brutal this year.
It's a national problem. The ACC one feels like it's been particularly like there's been days where like multiple like people covering the different programs are like, what the hell are we doing here? It is bad.
I just love the double standard as well. Like the Akeem Dent barely hits the guy in the face. Like I don't even think he does at all, which I guess is what was penalized. But I mean, there was nothing there. Everyone that watches that, I got text from like my girlfriend's dad who's like, I'm never watching football again if this is like what's called. And he's not a Florida State or Florida fan or anything like that. He was just watching the game. It's just, and then the Tate Rodemaker play where Desmond Watson, that's his name. Yeah. He rips Tate Rodemaker to the ground, like body slams him to the ground on a sack. And I mean, that's just a football play,
And I remember watching that in real time. I was like, oh, that seemed a little aggressive, but also like it is football. I'm like, that's fun. But
like, I'm fine with that. But you got
it. You want it to be
call it even, man. Even. Like, what are we doing? That was the most. I could not believe that was what they called. And good on Herb Street and Fowler on the call. They said the same thing. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was a turning point in the game because you would stop them on that drive. Who knows if he makes that kick? And then 2 plays later, after that penalty, they score a touchdown. Their first of the game. They're only of the game, right?
I've grown to be a pretty big fan of Mike Norvell losing his mind. Like, he doesn't do it often. It's not regular. He's not Jimbo where
he gets right in the ref's face.
He gets into it. But when he does it, he leans into it all the way. And he's a little bit here for it. The hands are going to be clenched behind the back. The eyes are going to look like lasers are shooting from him, and just breathing fire. We've only seen it 3 times this year, but it's been fun.
Bud tweeted out that he wouldn't have like blamed Norvell if he swung on him. I think that would have been a freaking story if the coach swung. on an official.
I
Unfortunately,
don't need that in game. We're busy enough.
that would be problematic. So anyways, what we're trying to get to, a lot of adversity for FSU, a lot of bad breaks for FSU early on, and you weather the storm. Chris, that touchdown drive before halftime, you mentioned the seam shot to Jaheim Bell, two guys who played at Valdosta connecting there. But like, what went right that drive? How big was that to kind of settle things down?
Well, you get it started with a 16-yard rush to the left by Benson out of shotgun. That's kind of the first time you felt like, ooh, Benson kind of hit a hole and did a little something there. And then you got a couple more plays leading up to the 29-yard shot to Bell. After that, Philly rips off a 16-yard run. So again, the running game feels like it's getting going a little bit. You're feeling pretty good about it. A little bit of stalling out there again. A 14-yard hit to Johnny Wilson, getting another guy involved. Again, Tate looks like he's very much settled in. And then, FSU ends up punching it in from a yard out after that play. The Johnny Wilson set up the Trey Benson run, first of 3 touchdowns for Trey Benson on the day. FSU's on the board. It's 12-7, 26 seconds left in the half. You did a good job of scoring. You did a good job of not really giving Florida time to get points, even though it got a little dicey there in that 26 seconds. And, you go into the halftime and, it's a new game. You're getting the ball first. You know what your defense is like in the second half. I think you're feeling pretty confident for it having been 12-0 and being bad in the first quarter. And I think there was one point I leaned over to you, Brendan, and I was like, the good news is we're so good in second quarters. We got nothing to be concerned about here. But you go into halftime, you feel pretty good about it. It's kind of like a whole new game. You've taken a little juice out of Swamp, a place that was pretty raucous and loud in that game. And then, you have the opportunity to come out in the second half, establish your dominance, take a lead, put the game away, play like you have all year in the second half. You know what your team is if you're Mike Norvell, and the team itself knows what they are. And they felt that way at the end of that drive, in my opinion.
So we get into the second half, and listen, like, it doesn't necessarily start like ideally with UF on offense. Like, they're able to put together a decent drive, and they're able to kick a field goal. So you're kind of, all right, defense, like, it's time. And Zach mentioned this. We are going to stop here and revel in it for a minute or two. Like, after that, the defense said, no, nothing else. Nothing else. The defense in the second half gave up 48 yards, 2.1 yards per play, 3 first downs, and all of that came on the opening drive because the remaining 4 drives were a 3-and-out, a 3-and-out, a 3-and-out, and then a 4-and-out. And he ended fittingly with a Kalen DeLoach interception, guy who's been through it and has had big plays all season. A senior and someone who like deserves his flowers, but like the level of domination that Florida State had in that stretch, where does it start? Like up front, Zach, like who are we kind of giving our hat tip to as like where this all kind of like begins, this stretch of dominance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the D line. There were certain drives in that game. I mean, I think it was one of the 3-and-outs was, I think, 3 sacks in a row. Was it? Or it was close to that. It might have been an incompletion in there.
There was
talking about
when
Peyton, when Peyton started exerting himself.
Yeah. And then Verse had obviously that massive stack that pushed the tackle into the quarterback. The D-line dominated throughout the game. I think in the second half, it just showed out more. They got in the backfield extremely fast. They were blowing up, pretty much anything UF wanted to do offensively before he could even develop. Verse had an awesome game. Patrick Payton had an awesome game. I thought Josh Farmer and Braden Fiss both were pretty impressive, shedding blocks on the interior consistently. It was just, I mean, that second half I think was dominated. You got to start with that defensive line. If you move back, I mean, there are other guys that stood out, especially I think the safeties played pretty well in this game. Akeem Dent, I think, had the best game of his Florida State career, which is pretty crazy to think about considering how long he's been at FSU. But I mean, he looked different. Like, I'd never seen him move like that. I'd never seen him play with like that much confidence. He looked like a complete dude.
Yeah, the Peyton sacks in between was Jared Verse pressure, Shaheem Brown breakup.
Yeah.
Okay. And so like it is ultimately this like,
which should have been a pick, by the way. He didn't catch it. I'm just saying. If
he could catch, he'd be a receiver.
They had a couple times where they had chances for interceptions, and they obviously got one at the end. But like that's kind of this season is like a lot of
they love their PBUs,
a lot of hands-on balls, and not a lot of interceptions. Kid show. But like the effort from the defensive line extraordinary. I agree with you, Zach. Like that's where it starts, is like the attacking unit, their forcing unit, the front porch, whatever you want to call them. Like they set the tone, especially in the second half. And as you start to build a little bit of like momentum and start to kind of get a little bit of a lead, it forces Florida to be a little bit more diverse in its play calling, I guess. And you start to kind of respond to some of the, I mean, the Billy Napier run game is really difficult to stop with all the eye candy that they have there. And then they also have just like a big offensive line, not necessarily a great one, and two really good running backs. And so it's difficult. And your linebackers settle down and are reading things better. Some of the pressure you're doing from your post players and getting into the box, like that all works out very well. But like the amount of production you got up front, like was built up to this point. And it was, we've had to talk about and sift through, why are they rotating defensive lines so much? Why are so many guys playing at this point? It's because you go into a game like this where you can play Jared Verse like all snaps but 10, and you can play Patrick Payton all snaps but 10. Like that's what this leads to. And this is what they've been building all season.
On that point, FSU's going into their 13th game, and every single guy they list on their depth chart at defensive line, which I think is a total of like 12.
Oh, you're talking about, yeah.
No, so it's like 10 to 12.
I was thinking
every single one is healthy and available. And obviously, like Briggs had to battle through it during the season. There's been some other instances like that, but that speaks to this all working for them.
Malcolm Ray had some moments that won't show up in the stat box, but like getting in the way and like being feisty and like, yeah, man, it was a cumulative effort. It was so fun to watch. Adam Fuller, like a hat tip to him. This is a legitimate top 10 defense at this point. I know they've played backup quarterbacks. Well, guess what? Like Florida State's playing a backup quarterback. Like
8-0 against the ACC, 2-0 against the SEC. Yep. Crown as champs of both, if you would like. You know, haven't given up 30 all year, which 30 is kind of a high benchmark. But let's be honest, that number is much lower if you take out the exception of a game or two.
I'm not here to slander the only defensive coordinator who's made Jaden Daniels look normal this season. Like,
that entire offense looked normal.
Yes, yeah, they dominated, and especially situationally. Anyways, like Adam Fuller, that defense, excellent job. You had to have that, like that group had to lead for you. They had to lead the charge, and it took them a little while to get settled in. Those two drives early in the game that you're giving up, 14 minutes time of possession. Can't have that like moving forward, but like the cumulative of it like was top notch. It was elite.
You know what? Defensive play hasn't come up that I absolutely loved. Was Renardo Green space, one-on-one, grabbing the guy, finishing it. Florida taking exception to it, which is all well and good. And Renardo Green acting like he really didn't give a flying. You know what? That Florida took exception to it.
His face, I took a screenshot of it. I'm going to send it to you guys right now. Like, it was disturbing because he just clearly didn't care. And
it was like, I did my job one-on-one, made sure I made the tackle. You guys do what you want about that. I'm going to go play the next play.
I think Renardo stood over him for a couple extra seconds.
Man.
Yeah. There was some.
You know how practice began last week?
Oh, I don't have an issue.
The bell rings and it's time for a fight. It's a battle out there. Both teams battled, and that's a credit to both teams.
You know, who's another underrated play?
What?
When Montreal Johnson gets an open space, I think it was Akeem Dent on the tackle.
Yeah,
Dent had a couple.
He kind of slips. He kind of slips. Montreal Johnson does, but if he breaks that tackle, it's like a 40-something yard or like a touchdown, maybe. Like
Dent had no one to the left where they had him one-on-one. And if he doesn't make it, there's a shot of them working to the pylon, and he makes a play.
There's multiple plays that Akeem Dent makes that save you from chunk plays. He was awesome.
His job, but he did a really good job.
Yeah, I was going to say he is a safety. That is the job. It is in the description. Is you're kind of the safeguard there. But
backers got picked on a bit with the Eugene Wilson movement, which is eye candy. It's going to mess with you. But like FSU didn't allow any of that to turn into something big, which ultimately means they won that battle. But I think that is why at times the linebackers were a little out of sort. Early in the game, I think there were also some communication issues in the back end. For example, the one with it might have been Montreal Johnson was wide open right along the sideline. Two guys went with the vertical guy. He got to sit alone underneath. Easy throw for Max Brown. So
the other side of the ball, offense, like trying to think of the best way to describe it. Like you did what you had to do, and it was just enough.
Body blows, baby.
The run game is, I think, where we want to focus on because it was so prevalent in that drive in the first half that Chris talked about, where you have a couple of chunk gains. And then the Trey Benson touchdown run to give you a lead in the second half where he has a little outside zone stretch, right? They got the lead off of that, if I remember correctly, his second touchdown.
Yeah.
He had three, which not a whole lot of people in this rivalry are getting three. So
14-12, I think
Yeah,
it was.
so it puts you up 14-12. And just like the blocking on that, the Dimitri Emmanuel and then Jaheim Bell and Darius Washington all on the left side, like zone blocking outside perfectly. UF's linebackers suck. I mean, that was something that we talked about going into the game, wrote about it. You watched their like weak side linebacker, or sorry, the middle linebacker there. Just
He just
completely
kind
like
of
run.
gets eaten up by like a Dimitri Emmanuel block, right?
Well, that was like the boundary side linebacker, but I'm talking about like the middle linebacker. I think I forget where the sticks were. It doesn't matter. Like the guy on the opposite side of the play, the backside linebacker, just like runs into the right guard like inexplicably, like after the play's already been bounced outside. Like just the eyes were terrible, but like you knew you were going to have a chance to get some of those. I think that was frustrating. Is like you thought you could run on that team, and you did at some points, but you also had a lot of like just self-inflicted issues with either. Honestly, I thought it was just a lot of bad tracks by the running backs on the day. Just a lot of
Dude,
opportunities where
there's a photo of the Benson run where he loses like 11 or 9 or
Yeah,
whatever.
you could shoot it up inside.
And it was like the most wide open hole ever. Like, yeah, I mean, he redeemed himself, but that's got to be something that
they dinged themselves from a running total standpoint with like 3 really bad runs, and 2 of them were kind of the high school element of, oh, I can pop this or I can keep stretching this and try to win, and you're not going to. They got good athletes on that side of the ball, even if they're not super disciplined and their culture on that side of the ball sucks. They still have good athletes.
Yeah, they do, and they have size up front, and you had to kind of wear them down, and so like that's ultimately like where FSU gets is you go ahead in the first half or in the second half, UF responds with their lone scoring drive of the second half, and the offense does enough, throughout. And I think there's some key plays like the Tate Rodemaker 4th and 3 to Ja'Kai Douglas, like really good throw, and Reed with the blitz coming. That's when Tate's so good, is like when he could just launch it and like let it go. And for Ja'Kai to make that catch, like awesome. You would have liked to have on what was the go ahead score in the fourth quarter, the field goal with Ryan Fitzgerald. You would have liked 7, not 3 there. Tate throw a little high to Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman doesn't come down with it, and he's come down with those kind of catches all season.
Does Mike Norvell go for that field goal, 19-yard field goal that Fitz made, if Tate's not the quarterback?
I think so. At that point,
because you got to get the lead.
Because you want the lead. Okay,
Yeah,
I did wonder that in a moment.
And there was like, I mean, there was 7 minutes left after that, I think.
And your defense was playing so well, but no, I mean, I think we wondered that initially in the press box, like if that would be like. Anyways, so again, not a perfect game, but like I think that game sealing drive, the touchdown by Trey Benson, all of like what's at play in that moment speaks very like strongly to 2 different teams and 2 different spots of their program right now. The Tate Rodemaker slide, in which he just gets obliterated, and it honestly could have been so much worse too. Like I think his head whiplashing and hitting the ground was as bad as like the initial contact, but like it was so close to both those guys sandwiching him in between the helmets. And then you see FSU, like keep in mind, like Jordan Travis got hurt in a similar place of the field on a similar play with us like running downfield the week before. And you saw the trainers, how fastly like they came out. And then FSU has a team doctor say some words, and UF players then escalate it by like starting to bow up and going over to like a huddle where players are injured. It was bizarre. It was a strange point in the game. And I think like that the fact that like FSU's players were again, multiple times this game kept their composure. Keandre Jones getting spit on.
Yeah, I think that was the turning point in the game. I was going to say that. I think.
Do you really?
Keandre Jones not reacting to that in a negative way and costing his team like an offsetting penalty, because I wouldn't take, like, if I was me, I don't know if I'd be able to maintain myself, and I think it speaks to the culture of the team, because that you get that penalty, and then obviously the targeting penalty was huge because they weren't going to pick up that first down if not for it. But I think it kind of foreshadowed what was to come of that game, which was UF was insanely undisciplined. They're poorly coached, and
Eugene Wilson pushing the coach aside, like flipping away. Like, what do we do?
Not a good culture right now for that program.
I'm really shocked their defense is undisciplined and poorly coached. Looking at the guy that's leading them.
Yeah, I mean, if they get a stop,
not like they're following the leader at all there.
Yeah, he's like running down the sideline, like taking a victory lap. I'm like, dude, act like you've been here before.
Well, he hasn't, to be
Congrats
fair.
on losing 5 in a row and being miserable on that side of the ball. Great job
Well,
there.
the word creeper gets thrown around.
Collect that paycheck. He been fired yet?
So like after the personal foul and the targeting penalty, which UF fans were booing, not all, but some were booing. Like, just come on. Like, what do we do? It legitimately pisses me off. Tate has to leave for a few plays. Brock Glenn comes in. Brock Glenn doesn't have a mouthpiece, according to Dane. And Dane's watching this very closely on the telecast. Doesn't have a mouthpiece in, but he's chewing gum and had a smile on his face. This is why
how close do you think Dane was to the TV when Brock Glenn came in? 2 inches? 3 inches?
I think he got pushed further back. If you catch my drift. But Brock Glenn goes in the game in really difficult circumstances and actually had the really nice little run on the read option. And shockingly, UF was not really disciplined and was offside. So FSU takes that instead. And then Tate comes back in the game. Doesn't really matter who was at quarterback for that play. You stayed afloat. You were in 3rd and short. You put 3 tight ends to the boundary. I think you just ran duo and you ran it right at him. And Trey Benson gets the first down. And then so much more with the cut move he makes. Shitty tackling for UF secondary. Again, just not a big surprise if you've been watching them this season. And Trey Benson scores a touchdown while looking back at Florida's defense. And that is the game sealer. And so real quick, so poetic that it was Trey because he took the Jordan Travis injury in real time, as difficult as anyone. Sobbing, we talked about this, struggling to even stay up. Someone who's dealt with his own injury, very close to Jordan, obviously. And we thought he had a good week of practice. And he had this nice light.
Carried the hammer in, so that usually speaks to that too.
And yeah, so he gets to carry the hammer in, and he gets to wield the hammer at the end and break the rock. So I hat tip to Trey Benson, who in 2 years at Florida State, and imagine we only have a few more games left of watching him here, has really like another example of what this program does so well. Evaluate, culture, develop, put guys in a position to succeed, and he responds in just an impressive, like immaculate way. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Trey's touchdown run comes on a goal line play. As far as the style of that play, what they're trying to accomplish there, obviously they were not at the goal line. I very much like that when Brock Glenn came in, they threw the ball.
Chris wanted a deep shot.
I did want a deep shot because I thought Florida would be playing to run and giving you one-on-ones. And I'm wholeheartedly comfortable with Brock Glenn taking a shot. Now, I get that a lot of people will lean the other way and be like, well, they should have run the ball, keep the clock moving. You're playing to end the game. I get that. But I just like it. I think that speaks to the confidence and belief that they have in Brock Glenn. If you listen to quarterbacks coach Tony Tokarz talk about him last week, talks about the moxie of the young man. I think we've all been generally high on the show of what he is capable of. Based on practice. I enjoyed when he was injected in there that it seemed like confidence was immediately there of like, this isn't a freshman in the swamp. This is a quarterback who we believe in, that if he does have to be the next guy up, if Tate was ultimately get hurt or they had to make a move, we got confidence in him. I just like that in that moment.
And you throw the ball there, and like I was fine with it too. If it doesn't get knocked down at the line, it's probably completed for 4 or 5 yards to Johnny Wilson. He had a little bit of an angle, and the ball looked like it was coming out of Brock Glenn's hands well. But that could be me just being biased and really liking Brock Glenn. Point being is you don't know how that game is going to end. Like you don't know if Tate Rodemaker is coming back into the game at that point, right? Like he has to go to the injury tent. So like to find a way to show that you believe in the true freshman quarterback, because he may have to lead another drive, like at that point in the game. So you need to have him settled in, get that first throw out of the way. Like I think it made sense. I had no issues with that.
Also worth mentioning the Keon Coleman punt return. It's one of those plays that we've kind of glanced over in this discussion, but it was important. It also is what helped set up FSU's first touchdown.
Yep. Keon didn't have his best game.
I'm sorry. It didn't set up the first touchdown.
It was the field goal, I think, right?
Yeah, it set up the Fitz go-ahead. That's what it was, yes.
Keon didn't have his best game, but, like, a couple big moments there, and obviously the punt return, like, that's what he's done so well. One of my worst takes of the season, guys, was I wasn't sure if I wanted Keon Coleman as a punt returner just because of the size, and then you watch him field some punts throughout preseason camp, and you're like, okay, yeah, that looks all right, and then you get to see him kind of move, and yes, he's been amazing at that this season and has really helped FSU out. So anyways, that's the game, guys. Like FSU finds a way to win, and yes, both teams have their backup quarterbacks, but FSU, without its star player, without its leader, grinds out another win, its 12th win of the season. What was your favorite?
Ninth in the last 13 against UF and 5 of the last 7 at the Swamp.
What's the winning streak at now, Chris? 18?
For FSU? Yeah, it's 18. 6 at the back end of last year and everyone this year.
I mean, think about this team the 3 years prior, I think won 14 games total.
I don't know. I try not to remember it.
Something like that. I mean, it just you had 4 losing seasons in a row, and you have now won 10 games in the season, 12 games in a regular season with still multiple games to go.
Coach Norvell had that moment in the post game. We weren't very good here a couple years ago.
They weren't.
So, yeah. Nah, I mean,
it's happened very quickly.
Enjoy 12-0. Quit worrying about the playoffs. Let it all play out. Go beat Louisville's ass. Let Washington, Oregon sort themselves out. Yeah, FSU will be where they need to be.
Can we talk about quarterback?
Sure.
I was going to do it in Buyer Sonone. Do you want to save it for?
Yeah, we'll save it for your little segment or whatever.
My little segment. Okay. Sponsored by the Turner Group. Thanks for sponsoring us, Colin. Sorry, the Zach thinks it's a little segment. You got his number. Let him know. What was your favorite play of the game? Like, there were so many cool moments, and again, the energy of that place was awesome. Start with you, Zach. Favorite moment? What are you gonna like when you're 10, 15 years from now? What's gonna be the memory of that game?
I think the Benson run to put it away. I mean, he kind of like falls into the end zone backwards, and I think it's just kind of telling, just because of how it was a gritty performance from him, from the entire team. Didn't have a ton of consistency, but he gets in the open field, and we know what happens when that occurs. Like, he makes guys miss, and he can outrun secondary players as a 215-pound or more running back. So, yeah, I mean, that was probably the most memorable play to me.
Chris?
Since Zach stole mine, I'm going to go with the Marching Chiefs playing during Tom Petty because it's a rivalry, and it really felt like a moment there. I'm like, that's a choice, but go and do it.
Yeah, you guys are really eating into my Buyer Sonone material, so I appreciate it.
Sorry. Zach stole my answer. I don't want to be bland. I mean, I guess if I had to go with no, it'd be Jaheim Bell, because that play, the 29-yard completion.
What about Trey's other run?
I can't interest either of you in Jared Verse sacking a quarterback with a 330-pound offensive
I mean, I already brought him up sacking an offensive lineman and getting a quarterback. I enjoyed pretty much every good play for FSU. I didn't really enjoy any of the bad ones, except for maybe when Florida went up 12-0 and thought they had the game.
You weren't enjoying that in real time. Don't lie.
Not in real time, but in retrospect,
let's talk about our player of the game, sponsored by the Battle's End. I feel like rosters that have 12-0 football teams, and there aren't a whole lot of them left in the country. The Battle's End been huge in player retention for FSU, and just giving guys on the roster like a chance to earn their worth and earn value to what they are worth. And yeah, the Battle's End, the collective, has done an amazing job in very short time, and has helped play a role in this team becoming one that's been really fun to root for and won nationally. So our TBE player of the game, I will start off on offense, guys. Can we just yell out Trey Benson on 3 or?
Trey Benson.
1, 2, 3, Trey Benson.
Trey Benson. No, Trey Benson.
Trey Benson.
And then on defense, this one might be a little bit more balanced and distributed. I will start off with Akeem Dent, because he looked like a man who was pissed off at the start of the game. He was just staring down Florida's players as they took about 30 minutes to walk across the field. And he delivered on that. If you're going to, kind of look at them, just laugh and smile and talk your what before the start of a game, you deliver. And he helped them weather the storm. His PFF grade was in the 90s, I think. His pass rush grade was 99, and I don't think they penalized him for a fake penalty there. So Akeem Dent would be my player of the game. He helped you a ton, especially in the first quarter.
Go ahead, Zach.
I'll steal Jared Verse from you. Sorry, Chris. Just completely.
It's like White Elephant.
Completely dominant in the second half, especially, but was impactful throughout. And seems like he always shows up for these big games, and couldn't have come at a better time for Florida State when they absolutely needed the defense to step up, and he was a large reason why they were so dominant in that second half.
And I'll go with Braden Fisk, because he played like a man on fire throughout that game, and he just brought it. And I also
he also walked
Jared
into
Verse and Braden Fisk press conferences together, because Jared Verse drives Braden Fisk nuts, and I love it.
He also walked into the stadium with a big boot on.
He did, and he walked out with a big boot on, but in between he kicked their ass.
He
That's
put their boot
crazy.
right up something. Yeah. So another ode to like hat tip to this team's resiliency and toughness and culture and grit and all those great things like that make football fun. Like Braden Fisk is just another shining example of it. And yeah, FSU just using the transfer portal too. What's up with that? Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, these guys.
Speaking of the battles end in the transfer portal, all that gets going here in the next week or two.
Let's take again another buyers to known. Let's take a quick commercial break. We're going to talk recruiting. We're going to maybe play buyers to known. If there's any prompts left when we get back. All right, welcome back to On the Bench. There was a few recruiting developments from the past week, and 'tis the season. Like we're here in late November. Yes, football games of substance are still being played, but we're having to juggle that with National Signing Day or early signing period, I should say, coming up in a few weeks. The transfer portal opens on December 2nd, as Chris alluded to a few minutes ago. So there are things to get to here. The main talking point, what I really want to get to is Zach was at Chaminade's playoff game and got to talk to Jeremiah Smith, number one prospect in the country, someone who FSU continues to chip away at. Chris, let's give Zach a round of applause for just asking a tough question, a direct question, I should say, almost right away, and eliciting a genuine response from Jeremiah Smith. He starts off with.
I'll own this. I didn't watch the video, so I don't know what the question.
Oh my God!
I'm sorry, I was busy.
Oh my
Soccer,
God! Well,
you know.
You had a soccer preview and
No. I had soccer to deal with. They had just won. It was Friday night.
Find someone who loves covering soccer in late November like Chris Nee does on a Friday night.
Hey, I like trophies. What can I say?
You know what? The soccer a round of applause to soccer for just kicking ass this season. So one more to go, though. We're not done yet. Two more to go. See how much I'm paying attention. Round of applause for me for paying attention to football during football season.
So, Zach, what was the first question? What was the response? And fill us in on Jermaine.
It was actually the second question, and his name is Jeremiah.
Damn, I keep doing that. That has really become an affliction for me. I don't know why. I did once cover Jermaine Smith, but man, I keep doing that.
Yeah, really went on the board a couple times.
I'm going to start writing it on my arm and just Jeremiah.
Zach, you talked to the number one recruit in the country. What happened?
Yeah, so after his game, so for context, I was at his game last week too, and they snuck him out of the game before it ended. They were up like 70-0 or something at that point, but I could not find him in the handshake line or even after the game. I waited outside the locker room, nowhere to be found. He was out of the area. So this week I come back, I asked Jeremiah just on the sideline, hey, are you going to talk after the game? He's like, yeah. So he had not been on record in 2 weeks for an interview, meaning he had not talked since the night after the Miami game when he spoke with us following that trip to Florida State. So I asked him, how was the game? About the his big win. They beat Cardinal Newman, which is Ricky Knight, FSU DB commits team, in the playoffs 40-0. And then I asked him, what's the status of your Ohio State commitment? And he responded basically saying that he was committed to, he was still locked in with Ohio State right now. He kept saying right now. So it was 5 right nows in a row after every.
But who's counting?
Yeah. After every response, he made sure to say that. It was a little, personally, I think Florida State has a good shot to flip him. I've said that over the past few weeks, and I still feel the same way. The most noteworthy thing that he said in that interview, and then in addition to an interview he did after he went to UF to watch Florida State play Florida in the Swamp, was that he actually might get back to UF for an unofficial visit after the FSU OV. We'll see if that happens. I don't think it's locked in or anything as of right now, but it's something that the UF staff is pushing for. He does have his Florida State official set up for December 8th through the 10th. And when I say that it might be difficult for the UF visit to happen, that's because Jeremiah Smith will play in his state championship game. If all goes well and they win next week, they'll play in a state championship game in Tallahassee that week before his official visit. So I think it'll be that Friday, December 8th through the 10th will be the OV. And then the following week, this happened last year as well with Chaminade Madonna, his high school. They played in a national championship game out west, like in Las Vegas or something. And that was on the Saturday. So if you guys remember last cycle, Edwin Joseph, who's Florida State's a true freshman defensive back at Florida State, he was still going through the recruiting process at that time. Multiple schools were pushing for him in the end. Louisville actually got him on a one-day official visit that Sunday after the national championship game that he played in out west. So he flew all the way over to Louisville and spent like the entire day there. But that was it, because after Sunday, that's a dead period. You go, 3 days, and then it's signing day, December 20th. So maybe Jeremiah Smith could pull something off like that. I don't expect that to happen, but I guess we'll see. Maybe they'll work some other weekend. I don't. There's not a lot of time left. There's not a lot of weekends left. So to me, like, we've put this out in reports before, but like Florida State has the ammunition to close here. They have the lone official visit remaining on Jeremiah Smith's schedule. Is he going to return to Ohio State before he signs? I think that's a huge data point, because when's the last time he was at Ohio State? I think for a game last month, like in October. That's a pretty big deal for him to be committed to Ohio State for that long and then seemingly not return there for the final 3 or so months of his recruitment. That makes me think that he's not sticking with the Buckeyes. But they have done a great job of recruiting him to this point. He has an excellent relationship with that staff, Brian Hartline, Ryan Day. So we'll see. But I still feel the same as I felt over the past few weeks, coming off of that Miami game visit. That's kind of a turning point for me in my thinking of where Florida State stands in this recruitment with the number one player in the country of Jeremiah Smith. We got less than a month until signing day. So, every day is going to be important to track his recruitment.
Zach, Buyer Sonone brought to you by the Turner Group. Would Keon Coleman going off against Louisville benefit FSU with Jeremiah, not Jermaine, Jeremiah Smith?
I mean, obviously. But at this point, it's like he's kind of seeing what he needs to see it from FSU and all these schools, right? Like I don't think a 1-game sample size where he's probably not even going to be like in attendance. Like, I mean, it's an ACC championship game. Recruits won't be there. So to me, like, the single one-off performances are great and all, but you got to remember, like, this is a kid that watched Keon Coleman put up 3 touchdowns against LSU in the season opener and one of the most, hyped games of the season. Like, I think those in-person experiences matter more. Obviously, it's going to help Florida State if he does put on a great performance, but I don't think it's going to be any sort of deciding factor.
Zach, who's sponsoring our recruiting segment? Let them know.
Football Coach College Dynasty, the best college football management game on PC. I'm having a lot of fun playing it. I've been busy lately, but I'm going to get back into it this week, hopefully, and a little bit of time before the craziness starts with the transfer portal and the final portion of the recruiting season. But if you love the transfer portal and high school recruiting, you can do both in Football Coach College Dynasty. It has an extensive recruiting option in that game, and it's my favorite part of that game because you get to evaluate players, recruit them, try to compete against other schools to land them, and then you can allocate NIL money to them and players in the transfer portal after the season. Really replicates modern college football. Football Coach College Dynasty is available on Steam right now for $15.
Do they have a Cyber Monday deal?
I have not checked that, but if you look on Steam, it'll let you know.
You know who has a Black Friday deal that's turned into a Cyber Monday deal?
Ooh.
Ooh, let them know, Chris.
75% off an annual subscription. It also is good for you folks who are monthly if you want to turn into 12 monthly. And we're here for you.
Yeah.
So
$27 for the entire year of coverage. That's crazy. And like Chris said, if you're a monthly subscriber paying $10 a month, this is probably something you're going to want to take advantage of, or however much it is monthly. Like it's going to be way more worth it to get the annual subscription of only $27 for an entire year's worth of coverage. So definitely take advantage of the 75% off deal. It ends tonight, right, Chris?
I think it actually ends tomorrow night at midnight.
Okay,
I think
so
it's
Tuesday
the plan.
night.
We have had well over 100 people already do it. I think it's actually closer to a couple hundred people do it. And, keep doing it. We're here for you. If you have questions, reach out to us. We're all available either via our Twitters or via the site, via PM on the site. Or if you have a question, just find us one way or the other. We're here for you.
And this is last thing on it. Like, this is the time of year where I feel like we flourish. Not that we don't. I take a lot of pride in the work we do throughout the year, but portal recruiting.
This is Sonone's season.
Dude, I'm dragging. I'm getting old, guys. A lot of grades.
Yeah, but when the portal opens, like Sonone's open for business, and he's going. Sonone's so locked in with the portal. That's like to me, that's your favorite thing to cover.
He's like Norvell on the field before UF, where it's just lasers, baby. It's just lasers.
Speaking of on the field for UF, there were a couple more recruits that FSU has interest in who were at the Florida game taking it all in. LJ McCray being the primary one. And Zach, after the game, you wrote a VIP article, again, for subscribers. You don't have to put everything behind it, but like that game, who it mattered to, I guess some potential like turning points for FSU to get that extra, like one more data point, another win, a resilient victory, like one more thing to sell. I guess who does it impact, and who are some players like you're keeping an eye on that game could have had an actual like legitimate effect on?
Yeah, well, obviously Jeremiah Smith, like we talked about before. LJ McCray is probably the next most important one. To me, like I'm not super confident that Florida State can pull off a flip. I just think there's things surrounding that recruitment that will tie him to UF and will make it hard for Florida State to kind of change his mind on that decision. But we'll see. Maybe I'm proven wrong, but that's just my kind of thinking right now. He was at the game. He did watch Florida State's defensive line absolutely take over in parts of that contest. And I mean, maybe that has him rethinking things. But to me right now, like coming off of this game, I just find it hard to believe that Florida State will be able to pull off the flip. I think if it does happen, or if it will happen, it'll have to be, LJ making some sort of internal decision to be like, hey, like, we should give Florida State like a real shot down the stretch. And I don't know if that's the case right now. I think FSU is definitely still in the mix. They're still talking to him and his family, but I wouldn't describe it as anything super advanced at this point. But it's definitely going to be a recruitment to watch down the stretch, just because of how important of a prospect he is. A 5-star defensive lineman, top 10 overall prospect in the country, someone that FSU badly wants. So we'll monitor that. I'll note 2 other guys. A UF
real quick, Zach, on that, like a legitimate like question. What is UF pitching to LJ McCray at this point? Like, as you've lost.
I mean, I don't know what their pitch is. Like, I mean,
you should know. You should know everything. That's expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume it's, come in, you're going to be able to play early. You're a really talented defensive lineman. You can get on the field in your first year and play meaningful snaps.
No, he can do that everywhere he's looking at. Next.
I'm not saying that that's not the case. I'm saying
my
this
point being is like you should be able to recruit against everything Florida is throwing right now.
But dynamics of this recruitment. Know the dynamics of this recruitment, and I don't.
Brendan is trying, and Zach ain't taking the bait.
Yeah, we're not getting into that, but yeah. So moving on, Brendan. Aaron Childs is a 4-star linebacker commit to UF. He spoke to Brian Doan of 24/7 Sports this past week and said FSU is a school trying to flip him from Florida. I think that is the case. Like Florida State's definitely in contact with him. I could see him maybe taking an official visit to FSU. I wouldn't describe like their conversations to this point as like anything advanced past just, normal talking with a recruit. Like, I don't think he's like, working a flip right away or anything like that. But if he does take an OV, I think it'll be important to monitor that one. I think USC and Maryland are both also trying to flip him. So we'll kind of see if he decides to take any official visits down the stretch. But to me right now, it seems like Florida State might, not be the school that will flip him at this point. A lot can change though. And then there's a 25 prospect I want to note, Daryl Duke Johnson. He's a linebacker, or he's ranked as a linebacker in our rankings, a top 50 overall prospect in the class of 2025. FSU's recruiting him as a safety. I think Florida State's in a really good spot with him. He was actually at the UF game, and he told me last night that FSU's his leader coming out of that game. And he's told me that for the past however many months, whenever I've spoken to Duke Johnson. He's out of Dodge County, I believe, in Georgia.
Georgia kid.
Eastman, Georgia. So FSU loves him. He has an awesome relationship with the staff. Carter Barfield, I think, has done a good job with him and a few others. But yeah, I mean, he's a super talented prospect. If you turn on the tape, it's really awesome to watch. Like he's a really, unique player because he's kind of like a hybrid safety to me. Very physical and the speed is elite as well. So yeah, a prospect for next year's class that Florida State fans should get to know, Daryl Duke Johnson.
So Zach, as we transition from recruiting brought to us by Football Coach College Dynasty, I want to ask you this question, a buyer's known brought to you by the Turner Group. Does FSU add a linebacker in the 2024 class down the stretch? Non-portal linebacker.
Buyer's known is the prompt.
Also known. I think they could. Like, I think the Coy Parrish kid is probably the most likely addition for them. But even then, like, how much, because Florida State has to really value roster spots down the stretch. Coy Parrish is a really talented prospect, but if a really, really talented linebacker enters the portal and they have a real shot at landing him, like who are you rather taking in that class? Like, to me, it's probably the portal kid. But we'll see. Like, I'm not. If Coy Parrish wants in the class, they're going to take him. He's a super talented.
Dane's going to make sure of it.
But Ohio State's also trying to flip him from Minnesota. This is a 4-star. He's listed as a DB, but he's a linebacker for FSU. He's out of Minnesota, committed to the Golden Gophers. But Ohio State and Florida State are two schools that are looking to try and change his mind down the stretch. He has an OV set for December 15th through the 17th. We talked about this in the last pod, but just a rehash in case anyone missed it. I mean, he's the most likely right now if they were to add a high school linebacker. But like I said, I think because at that point, if you think like that's 2 weeks into the portal opening or a little over, a week and a half. So I think FSU is going to have a good idea of who kind of are the portal targets for them in that first week. And I, quickly just touching on the portal, I don't want to get, too sidetracked here, Brendan, but
I mean, I got hours. Chris is the one that has to be somewhere in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say this real quick. I think Florida State's more prepared now than ever entering this portal window after some conversations I've had over the weekend. Like, yeah, they're ready. They're operating from a position of power. They kind of were last year. I think that's why you saw that portal class be so dominant. But I mean, now they're really going to be handpicking who they want. They're not. Yeah. It's not going to be a big portal class. It's not going to be
drafting from the portal.
It's not going to be like the past few years where you see like more than 10. I think it's going to be probably less than 8 or it'll probably be like 5 to 6 guys. That's what the expectation is going in. Obviously, that number's impacted. Weird. Obviously, that number's impacted a ton by like how many players they lose to attrition. Obviously, some of that will be some. Like, they obviously want to lose some players to attrition because some of those guys are not going to play on this team. But we'll kind of see how that unfolds. I just wanted to make note of that. Like, I think Florida State's in a really strong position entering the portal window.
I was trying to make fun of Miami's coaching staff's bullshit narratives, and Zach kept going, so it's fine. Whatever. You guys want to play Buyer's known real quick?
Yeah, brought to you by the Turner Group.
The Turner Group. Yeah, let's talk about the Turner Group. Like, what better time to get a new house than around Christmas? Like, do you want to surprise your wife? Don't buy like a puppy or a car in the driveway. No, go all out and buy a brand new house. The Turner Group can help you get there. They can help you do it swiftly, and they can help you do it with a ton of peace of mind as you go ahead and make what, Zach? What?
I just want to say, I have now personal experience using the Turner Group.
Did you buy a house?
My parents purchased a townhouse in Tallahassee. It was an extremely easy process. My dad is like, not like super easygoing with this stuff. So
you think Jeff's a little high strung?
Jeff.
Oh, yes. Jeff. But Jeff's awesome. And they dealt with Colin directly. And they had a great conversation.
Awesome.
They set him up with a someone located in Tallahassee to look at places there. It was super easy going, and I mean, I think their plan is to try and like Airbnb the place when they're not there for football Saturdays in the fall, and try to make it a return on investment. And from everything that they've seen early on, it's a really good investment. So I just wanted to make note that that's a positive story with the Turner Group. You guys should definitely try them out if you're in the market,
or even if you're not. Again, Christmas present for your wife. She'll love a brand new house. Just surprise her with it.
All right, Brendan. Lightning round of buy or Sonone. Let's go.
Buy or Sonone. Marching Chiefs playing during We Won't Back Down.
I'll buy it. It's a rivalry game. Like it is what it is. It was a choice, though. Wholeheartedly, it was a choice.
Absolutely buy.
I'm
here for the pettiness.
I don't get it. Buy or Sonone. Florida, after watching them yesterday up close, personal, has some deep-rooted problems.
I will buy on the defensive side of the ball. They 100% look like a Willie Taggart FSC football team.
What about Eugene Wilson slapping his
that was a moment, but like I'll let that be an emotional moment. The defense, it was a consistent.
They also have 2 offensive line coaches, and their O-line might be one of the worst that Florida State's played this year.
Buy or Sonone. Adam Fuller will be a head coach somewhere in 2024.
I'm starting to feel a buy there, especially if he's a Broyles Award finalist. I feel like that's a natural order to he's going to be on a hot board for this job and that job. So yeah, and I think it's going to be a very active season of coaching.
Could Boston College come open? That would be his. That would probably be.
Yeah,
I think they'd go probably offensive though if they get rid of Halfley.
Yeah, but it won't go open. He made a bowl.
Yeah,
that's the ceiling there. Buy or Sonone. Brendan Sonone cries if Adam Fuller leaves Florida State.
I've already cried once this year and expressed that emotional vulnerability, and then some weirdo on Twitter made something that only took 3 minutes on Microsoft Paint that was clearly pretty elaborate and was probably worse than his shitty highlight video of Keon Coleman catching a touchdown over their shitty DBs. Continue. Sonone. I won't cry if Adam Fuller leaves. I do love Adam, but I won't cry. Maybe tears of joy. You know what? Bye. I'd be very happy for him. Tears of joy.
I love that Sonone. Sonone has the most deep-rooted hate about Miami and FSU and Miami and Florida. Of any of us, and he's the one who has the least attachment to the athlete.
You want to know why? You want to know why? Because I'm an empath. I can sense energy, and I just sense a bunch of steaming piles of. All right, let's keep going. Buy or Sonone. I blame you guys for derailing me late. I'm getting emotional right now. Buy or Sonone, your thought on the quarterback outlook in 2024 changed with this data set.
I'll buy that because I was one that, partly to drive conversation when you did the piece about the portal. So that I'm not sure.
Oh, you're not spitting now, are you? Chris?
No, he did.
I'm not
out. To be fair,
I'm not anti-Tate, but like, yeah, if there's an option in the portal, I think you definitely take a wholehearted look. I mean, I am still very much Team Brock, and we all.
I'm Team Brock as well. But do you feel comfortable in Brock leading this program and there not being a considerable drop off in quarterback play? I mean, he's
if
a
you're portal hunting,
next year.
You got to nail it. If you're portal
100%.
I'm still very adamant.
But do you think the staff doesn't nail a quarterback?
Oh, they're good at it. They're really good at it. But quarterback portal hunting, it is.
Yeah,
it's a different dynamic. I mean,
they're comfortable with different animals. But
I mean, the last guy they got was not a. I don't think that was a
different time with Mackenzie Milton. There was a calculated risk, and you also wanted someone culturally. And ended up being like good for that. But like, yeah, I mean, you were rolling the dice on a guy that had a major knee issue that you weren't really sure, like with nerves and stuff like what. You would have a different talent pool to select from.
Let's be honest, that question was solely for me.
Yes, right? It was, and for me to say Sonone because I feel the exact same way today as I did 2 weeks ago, as I did probably a month ago. Again. Brock Glenn fan club president. I'm dibbing it. Like Dane doesn't get to call him Peyton Manning and get to shove me out. Like, no, like that's not how this is working.
He said prime Tom Brady last week, I think, right?
As he backed up from the television against his own. Buy or Sonone, an FSU win over Louisville assures a playoff spot.
Bye.
Yeah, it's just people are going to talk about it this week.
If it doesn't, it's the biggest fixed job in the entire sports history, I think.
Oh, we rage.
Are we storming the
All right, for On the Bench, this has been Brendan Sinone, Zach Blostein, and Chris Snee. Thank you to our sponsors. We will talk to you guys later this week.